So let's begin with a simple question. What is AI? Here's how it was defined by John McCarthy, the computer scientist who first coined the term in 1955. Artificial intelligence, or AI for short, is the intelligence of machines and the branch of computer science that aims to create it. AI is the science and engineering of making intelligent machines, especially intelligent computer programs. Now, humanity has been fascinated with the idea of intelligent machines for a long, long time. It's a concept that's percolated through math, science, and literature for centuries. AI can trace its lineage back to ideas like the engine from Jonathan Swift's 1725 novel Gulliver's Travels, or Nikola Tesla's idea of a borrowed mind from 1898. In 1920, a Czech writer wrote a play called RUR that introduced the concept of a robot to the world for the first time. And in 1927, the science fiction silent film Metropolis was released, which featured the first robots on film. Now, all of this took place long before the term artificial intelligence existed. All of these ideas were floating around people's imaginations, but they were purely in the realm of science fiction and fantasy. They couldn't be real at the time because we simply did not have the technical capacity to create them. The hardware didn't exist, the software didn't exist, and up until this century, really, AI was just an impossible dream. Now this, for instance, is IBM's first commercially available hard drive from 1956. This device, which did nothing but hold information, weighed 1,000 kilos, could only be moved by a forklift or 6 or 7 people, and could only house and store a grand total of 5 megabytes of data. Now 5 megabytes is roughly the size of a single MP3 file, or perhaps 2 high-resolution pictures. So you can see that even though in 1956, visionaries could conceive of artificial intelligence, humanity was still handicapped by the very real limitations of physical hardware. Today we're living in a very different world. This USB drive weighs just a few grams, it's the size of a coin, and it has 100,000 times more memory and is a few million times cheaper than that first IBM hard drive. Now, this rapid evolution of technology in just 60 years is unprecedented. AI only exists today because we have hardware and software that make it possible, and that's only because over the last century, our computing capacity has followed the trajectory predicted by a computer scientist named Dr. Gordon Moore. In 1965, Dr. Moore observed that the circuitry in computer chips was constantly getting smaller, cheaper, and more efficient, to the point that computing capacity was doubling every 2 years, or even every 18 months. This trend that he pointed out has continued non-stop and is now known as Moore's Law. Moore's Law is basically the key driver behind the digital revolution. Companies like Apple and Microsoft only exist because they were born at a moment where they recognized that they could take advantage of Moore's Law, which made it possible to produce an affordable computer and put one in every home. That was absolutely inconceivable before the 1970s. Now, this consistent, unrelenting growth of computing capacity led to the creation of the hardware and software necessary for AI to thrive. A vivid illustration of Moore's Law is the transformation of mobile phones over the last 30 years. So the phone on the left is Motorola's first mobile phone from 1985. It cost roughly $5,000 and it was the size and weight of a brick. Within a few short years, the circuitry and electronics evolved, and phones got smaller, sleeker, sexier, and infinitely smarter. So the phones we have in our pockets today, or sitting in front of us, actually have a greater computing capacity than some of those room-sized supercomputers from the 1950s. And this trend towards smaller, smarter, and more powerful devices is not slowing down. In fact, it's accelerating. This next graphic tracks the evolution of computing over the last century. Now, the details are interesting, but mostly I just want to point out this curve and where it is projected to lead in 25 years. So this curve, this shape starts out relatively flat, and then it gets steeper quickly. This is the signature of exponential growth. Now, as this chart notes, in 2018, computing capacity increases more with every hour than it did in total during its first 90 years. This kind of exponential growth is disruptive and profoundly different from linear growth. Linear growth goes up or down in small degrees, and the changes are gradual and incremental. That's the kind of change we're used to dealing with. Exponential growth is less common, but we do sometimes recognize it when it appears in nature. For example, exponential growth is the rate at which a strain of bacteria multiplies when antibodies are not present. It's the rate at which viruses will grow unchecked. It's the speed at which epidemics spread and at the pace at which undetected cancer cells will divide. Now, it happens in higher life forms as well. Here's an example from Australia, where in 1859, a farmer imported the continent's first 24 rabbits because he missed England and wanted something to shoot at for sport. Well, he didn't cage those rabbits, so 70 years later, Australia had bred 750 million rabbits. Now, that's typical of the exponential growth of an invasive species. An organism will replicate exponentially when it finds a resource-rich environment where it faces no resistance or has no natural predators. Well, computing power is growing exponentially, and computers are invading and colonizing our human ecosystem, similar to the way an invasive species would. The capacity and reach of the digital world we've created is in the process of overtaking the human and organic world we live in. Just like any species facing something new encroaching into our ecosystem, we have to adapt and evolve to address this new reality we're facing. What's happening today, with technology spurring profound transformations in how we live and work, is just going to continue. The rate of change will accelerate. It's not going to slow down. The series of disruptions we will experience are just going to come at us faster and faster. Now, this is why historians and scholars say that we're at the very beginning stages of what they call the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Every industrial revolution in human history was triggered by a key technological advance. Now, this chart documents how each time humanity discovered how to use a new power, it led to inventions and innovations that unlocked new possibilities for everyone. Now, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is still in its very early stages, is about how human beings are learning how to use the power of networked and connected objects. Very soon, everything that we produce will be linked and connected to our digital infrastructure. Not just our computers and our mobile phones and devices, but also our clothes, our appliances, the objects in our homes, our automobiles, and soon even our bodies. The Fourth Industrial Revolution is about cellular biology combining with digital network technology. Now, this is where the sciences of biology and computing coalesce into a new hybrid. This is where that exponential growth curve leads. The futurist Ray Kurzweil famously called this moment the Singularity. Now, the Singularity sounds very sci-fi, but we've arrived at a point where this is no longer theory. It is actually unfolding in real time. In fact, this projected path that leads to humanity and technology combining